This is my channel's weekly compendium, ending Monday, July 10th, 2023.
Case file number 1184, written by JSP27, The Silver Time Travelers. This was back in 2006, when I worked at a pretzel store that rhymes with candy cans in a local mall. This is during the dead afternoon days of the summer. Usually there would be just one person. At this time, I am that one person. The day was going by pretty slowly, and with no windows, time would often stand still. Cameras made it hard for us to text people and slack off. Regardless, at some unknown time, a family of 3, mother, daughter, and young son, stopped some distance from the counter and stare at me and the pretzels. I would not have thought it to be odd except for how they were dressed. They looked like they came straight out of the 1950s. The son was much younger and was in 1950s style clothing as well. I'm thinking how weird this could possibly be, but then realized that right upstairs there was a professional photography place, so they were probably dressed up for some old-timey photos. It was not until the little boy came up to the counter and asked for a pretzel that things got odd. I told him the price, $2.66, and he handed me a $1 bill. I motioned to the mother that the pretzel cost $2.66 and he was $1.66 short. She looked at me like I told her the pretzel cost $10. I mean, I understand that $2.66 was high for a pretzel, but she looked at me as if I wanted her to fork over her life savings. The little boy, not talking, hands me the dollar. I take a hard stare at it and realize that it's a silver certificate, series 1957. And this dollar bill did not look like it was almost a half-century old. It had normal wear and tear, like a Series 2003 bill had at the time. It wasn't crisp, but it was still very much usable, and a bank would probably use it for further transactions. At this point, I realized that nobody else really crossed their paths the entire time, and the entertainment/music store next door was pretty dead, even for a midsummer afternoon, while pedestrian traffic just seemed to be non-existent. I hand the dollar back to the young boy, and he walks away with his mother and sister. About 10 seconds later, pedestrian traffic walked through the area of the store once again. Case file number 1185, written by Butts Are Smelly, The Time Warped Call. So this glitch starts a few weeks before the glitch. I get a call from an unknown number. It was what seemed to be a wrong number or prank, so obviously I say hello, and as soon as I say that, it disconnects. Now 2 or 3 weeks later, present day, my phone goes missing. I looked everywhere. Then, as my mom is at work, I use my grandma's phone to phone my phone to find it. So I'm calling it, but can't hear it anywhere. But then someone answers. It was the same hello I said 2 weeks ago. Obviously terrified, I disconnected from the call. I call my mom a bit later and she rings it. It was under my bed. I have no clue what happened. Case file number 1186, written by D. There were 2 versions of my daughter. 2 years ago, myself and my husband and 3 daughters were all in our own bedrooms. Myself and husband obviously share, and the 3 daughters all had their own bedrooms also. Daughters were aged 5, 8, and 17 at the time. Anyway, it was pretty late at night, and my youngest was soundly asleep, as usual at those times. However, I could hear my 8-year-old daughter in her room down the hallway still messing around on her iPad or whatever, so me not wanting to get out of bed as I was undressed and too comfortable, I just lay there. I messaged my 17-year-old and asked her to take her sister's iPad and ask her to settle down now. Their bedrooms were down the hall facing each other. My eldest texted back and said, "Okay, will do. Night, Mom." Only a minute or so had passed when I heard my eldest crying out. This was strange. So I got up, shoved a dressing gown on, and went to check what was happening. I got to her room and she was literally shaking and crying. My instant thought was, oh my god, is something wrong with my 8-year-old? Assuming my eldest had gone to settle her down as I asked, and was maybe faced with my 8-year-old hurt or something. So I immediately turned to look into my 8-year-old's bedroom, only to see her soundly sleeping in her bed. That was strange on its own because just minutes ago, I had heard her still awake and messing around. I turned to my eldest and asked, "What's happened?" My eldest was ghostly white, and she proceeded to tell me that when I texted her, she had gone to tell her sister to settle down, as I had asked her to do, but she saw her sister sound asleep in her bed, so figured I must have just been hearing things. Here is the freaky part. So just as my eldest was about to go back into her room, which for context is literally 1 foot away from her sister's room, she said she saw my 8-year-old daughter coming out of the bathroom right up along the corridor near her room, and she began walking towards my eldest's direction, probably to go back to her own room. My eldest, shocked, turned to look at her sister's bed again and saw her sister still in her bed sleeping, simultaneously whilst another was walking down the corridors out of the bathroom. So in effect, she was looking at 2 of my same child. My eldest was inconsolable. To be honest, I freaked out, and when she explained this to me, I asked her, "Well, where did the other one go?" And she replied, "I don't know. I was so scared, Mom, and just came back here," referring to her room. Just for context, my eldest daughter wasn't in any way, shape, or form asleep when I texted her to settle her sister, so that rules out her being in a sleep-like state and just imagining it. The corridor light was on as always, so that rules out her seeing things in the shadows. My youngest was 100% asleep, and even if it had been her, there was a massive difference in height and looks. It was undeniably my 8-year-old. Even when you bring the story up today, my eldest gets tears in her eyes from how scary the whole thing was for her. Case file number 1187, written by Nachthund. My pumpkin broke the universe. This happened 9 years ago, and talking about it today still fills me with fear. My boyfriend and I were renting a property, and we were the only people to have a key. We love Halloween and normally buy a pumpkin at least, but this year we were both working and didn't have time for it, so we didn't buy any pumpkins or decorations at all. The day after Halloween, I was getting ready to leave for work and headed down the stairs for the first time. My boyfriend was still in the bedroom when this happened. I go to the top of the stairs, and at the bottom of the stairs was a carved pumpkin, with your typical pumpkin smiley face, with a lit candle inside. The worst part is it was positioned so that it was facing the stairs. I screamed, and my boyfriend came to see what happened, and when he saw it, he freaked out too. We checked all the doors and windows, and they were all locked. Nobody else had keys to our house, and we didn't buy any pumpkins. We, to this day, have no idea how this pumpkin appeared in our house. I recently heard about this glitch in the Matrix thing, and I'm starting to think this could have been that. Let me know what you guys think. Case file number 1188, written by Sad Clown with a Big Unit. The Matrix translated my conversation. So this is a very minor glitch, but I'm still thinking about it a few days later. I'm a dealer in a casino, and I mostly do baccarat, which is very popular with Asian people. So all day at work, I rarely hear English from any of my players. A few days ago, I had a table full of some of my regulars, a group of older Vietnamese ladies. They understand English just fine, but don't speak it very well. So I'm just sitting, looking over at one of the TVs, watching hockey, while they take their time placing their bets. For everyone unfamiliar with baccarat, there's a big scoreboard on the table that keeps track of the results of the hands. Think like roulette. The ladies are all chatting, and I don't understand a word of it. But then I hear one of them say to another, "Hold on, I can't see the board. What was the last hand?" So I turned the board more in their direction and told her what the hand was. All the ladies immediately start yelling at me, "You speak Viet and not say anything?" And I'm confused and tell them I'm pretty sure she said that in English. They insist that they don't speak English to each other and joke that after listening to them all the time I must have learned something. Maybe she did say it in English and didn't notice, but the fact that all of them got excited about me possibly understanding makes me think something was weird about that situation. Case file number 1189, written by The Lindbergh Baby, The Strange Case of Seeing Myself Twice. When I was a teenager, I saw myself 2 times at my childhood home, and I can't explain it, but I will never forget it. The first time, I was walking down the stairs in my home. The stair was U-shaped, and when I got to the middle part of it, I saw the back of myself walk firmly down the last steps and turn straight to the right and into the entrance hall. I remember being really surprised, but also a bit creeped out about the way that I walked. It was really robot-like and stiff. I had no interest in following myself, so I ran to my room. I got really scared and didn't share this with anyone. The next time happened soon after the first time, when I was out playing in our yard with my siblings and our cousin. We had a big yard and a lot of trees and bushes. We were running around when I saw myself again just standing frozen between some bushes. I remember it really vividly and can even recall the blue sweater I was wearing, which was my favorite back then. I wasn't sure if I should ask the others if they could also see it, and was afraid they wouldn't believe me or get afraid themselves too, so I didn't. There was something off about the way that I was standing or something, but it gave off really unfriendly vibes. I have never experienced anything like this before, and sometimes I wonder if it really happened because there's no way for me to explain it. Case file number 1190, written by Ali Matter, The Vanishing Popcorn Shirt. Last year, I must have switched timelines in an H&M. I still don't have an explanation for what happened. I visited the H&M in Times Square in June 2022 and saw a cute popcorn tank top, like the scrunchy ones from the 90s, on a mannequin, and then some of the same shirt for sale on a rack next to the mannequin. I grabbed one to try on, and there were maybe 6 others left on the rack, including a couple in my size. I tried on the shirt in the upstairs dressing rooms and adored it, but I was trying to stay on budget and couldn't decide. So I took it back to the rack with the others to think about it, figuring they wouldn't sell out in the time it took me to put a few other things away first. All the shirts were still there. I went upstairs for 5 minutes max, put a couple shirts back on the rack, then headed back downstairs to the main floor to grab the tank top because I couldn't stop thinking about it. I still think about the shirt, it was so cute. I walked back to the same mannequin and was surprised to see it wearing a completely different outfit. Okay, someone probably bought the clothes from the mannequin, but they're still on the rack, right? Nope, not a single shirt is left on the rack, and there are other, very different shirts in this place now. How did all the shirts sell out in 5 minutes? How did the mannequin get an entire makeover in that time? I immediately asked a nearby employee that was restocking racks if they knew what shirt I was talking about or if the mannequins had been changed recently. They had no idea what shirt I was describing and said the mannequins hadn't been changed that day. I went up to the front counter and asked 2 more employees about it and got the same answer. No one had brought the shirts to the checkout counter and no one had changed the mannequin. So where did they go? I looked around the entire store one more time, even went to the dressing room rack to see if someone had put one back. Nothing. I've scoured the internet for it. Nothing. I have no proof of this popcorn shirt other than my memory. Everything in this timeline feels the same, but my dream shirt no longer exists. Case file number 1191, written by Milky's a Duck and Dangerously Punk on Instagram. When the Moon Stares Back. Before I start, this was around 4 years ago. Since then, I've had several incidents where something like, not exactly this, happens. And I remember this story again. I've told it to friends, family, therapists. Nobody is sure what caused it. If it was a sudden panic attack, but I like to think I saw something I wasn't supposed to. It was around 9 to 10 p.m., Canadian fall, so it was already pitch black outside. I had my window wide open and my curtains drawn back with my desk and laptop beside it. I might have gotten bored or just hungry, so I figured I would go downstairs, get a snack, and come back up. My door faces my window, so as soon as it opens, I look outside. I have a habit of closing my door when I leave, which makes it a real pain to balance plates and cups while trying to open it. I come back up the stairs with my plate, and I was hit with a random feeling of unease. I couldn't pinpoint it, so I ignored it and opened my door. This part is hard to explain a bit, but the moon was right outside my window. No, not the regular size moon. I mean, as if the moon had inflated massively and was standing right outside, looking into my room and directly at me, faceless. I panicked, and the dread hit. I wasn't supposed to be here. I didn't want to be here, and I have to leave. I felt it communicated this to me telepathically. Not exactly words, but as soon as I saw it, I knew, and I closed the door. I started to freak out and hyperventilate a little. Took a few minutes to calm myself down and open my door again. The moon was back in the sky. There was no presence of the moon that I encountered. I felt relief. I closed my window and blinds daily after that. Case file number 1192, written by FSEF Islet, the mysterious savior in green flannel. I have one scenario that I have yet to be able to explain. When I was 16, a friend and I were involved in a serious car crash. We were both unconscious and were taken to a hospital in an ambulance. The only thing I remember from the crash scene was a younger guy in probably his mid-20s standing over me next to the car door. I just remember him helping me. I still remember to this day, 10 years ago, that he was wearing this green flannel shirt. Once I came to the hospital, I asked everyone at the scene who the guy was. I wanted to know because I remembered him helping me out. No one saw this guy. I spoke to everyone that was there and no one saw the guy matching that description. To this day, I have no idea who helped me at the scene. I can still picture his face and clothing perfectly, even though I don't remember anything else clearly from the crash scene. My family said it was a guardian angel. Me not being religious knows that's not true, but I have yet to be able to come up with an explanation. So maybe. Case file number 1193, written by Jelly Rolls Rock, when food transcends time and space. I was doing some stuff in the kitchen and decided to eat a chocolate macaroon that had been sitting there for a while. My girlfriend was in the bathroom, which is 2 doors further into the hallway. As I took a bite, my girlfriend yelled, "Are you having something with chocolate?" I was, still am, shook. I walked into the bathroom with half of the macaroon sitting in my mouth. We both looked at each other in complete shock. She told me she suddenly had a faint chocolate flavor in her mouth but wasn't eating any. She didn't even have any chocolate that day. One could maybe say it has to do with smell, but that dry macaroon had no smell left at all. Would have been too far away anyway. Still weirds us out. She thinks this is meant to be. I'm thinking glitch. Case file number 1194, written by Walla Walla Rhubarb, The Curse of the Old Trunk. My brother and I were getting paid to clean out old junk from this house that just so happened to be one of the oldest houses in town. We went to church with the couple that owned it, and it had been in their family for a few generations. We were working with the couple's grandson and his buddy. The house was full of typical old people junk, ancient furniture, newspapers, and random crap. We were greenlit to strip the house of anything inside except for an old trunk in the attic full of old tools, hammers, drills, etc. Apparently, the lady's grandfather built the house with those very tools. My brother and I had no problem with that, seeing as this was the biggest damn trunk we've ever seen. Her grandson and his buddy didn't really care and ended up taking some of the better conditioned tools with them. Fast forward a week, we are at a church when the part where people say what they are praying for comes up. Someone says the name of the couple's grandson. We don't think much of it until after Mass when the old lady walks up to us. We ask her what happened to her grandson. She tells us that he was in a pretty bad accident because he lost control of his truck. Then she asked us in a serious tone if we took any of the tools from the trunk and that if we did, we needed to give them back. We told her no, we didn't, but her grandson did. She said she knew because he had them still in the bed of his truck when he crashed. I later found out they sold the house, which promptly burned down soon after. Part of me believes it's because whoever bought the place threw out those old tools. Case file number 1195, written by Anonymous. My real-life X-Files experience on a desolate highway. I can't say for sure what happened to me that night, but here is what I know. I was driving home for the weekend from school at Indiana University. It takes me about 2 hours to get home, and I left Bloomington around 10 p.m. At exactly 10:53, I am on a rural stretch of the 2-lane highway I take home, and I notice what appears to be flashing lights behind me. I thought, great, I'm getting pulled over. So I turned onto the next county road about a quarter mile from where I noticed the lights. As the car came to a stop, and I started to open my glove box to get out my registration and proof of insurance, the lights suddenly disappeared, and no one drove past. Now, here is where the story takes a turn for the weird, and I'm sure you guys will think I'm just making it all up, because it really does seem like something straight out of a typical UFO movie or story. The electronics in my car started to go haywire. The radio was randomly changing stations while the volume kept going up and down, while the dome light and headlights started to flicker and turn off and back on. This was at 10:56 p.m. I start thinking to myself that my battery must be failing, or else I have a short somewhere in the electric system on my car. So I lean down to pop the hood so I can take a look at the battery, and that is the last thing I remember doing. The next thing I know, I open my eyes and see nothing but the night sky full of bright stars. It was a cold night, and it seemed like I had never seen stars that bright in my life. I sat up and looked around and saw absolutely nothing. Nothing at all. I was in the middle of a field, surrounded by corn stalks left over from the recent harvest. As I started to come to my senses, I started to freak out. Where am I? Why the hell am I asleep in the middle of a field? Where the hell is my car? I got up and started walking toward the distant headlights I could see from a road about a half-mile away. When I got to the nearest intersection, I looked at the signs which read 350 north and 50 west. I was a half-mile away from my car, which was just right off the main road. I started walking towards the headlights I could see on the main road. I can't say how long it took me to walk the half-mile, but it couldn't have been more than 10 or 15 minutes. When I arrived at my car, all the lights were out. My battery had died, which struck me as odd because I couldn't have been gone for that long. I looked at my phone, which was sitting on the passenger seat, and the time was 2:17 a.m. Over 3 hours had passed since I turned off onto the side of the road for the flashing lights behind me. I remember sitting in my car completely dumbfounded, wondering what the hell had just happened to me. After about an hour and a half of just sitting there, I remembered that my battery was dead, so I got on the phone and called AAA to come out and give me a jump. It took about an hour for them to get out to me since I was a good distance away from the nearest town, during which time I just sat in silence, running through the possible scenarios in my head concerning what had just happened. To this day, I couldn't tell you what really happened to me that night. All I know is I can't think of any plausible explanations as to why I woke up over a half-mile away from my car in the middle of a cornfield more than 3 hours after I had stopped. I have only shared this story with one other person, my uncle. I am sure people would either look at me like I'm crazy, or they would call bullcrap on the whole story, and I can't blame them. If somebody came to me with a story like that so closely mirrors a stereotypical encounter story, I probably wouldn't believe them either. Bonus file written by Robeck 1981. Ghostly whispers stuns unsuspecting couple. My girlfriend and I went to a theme park for the day that was about 2.5 hours away. I'm driving us back home, and by an hour in, I'm exhausted, so I pull over to walk around at the first place I can. This place was dark and terrifying. It was just pavement with undeveloped land on one side, freeway on the other, and lanes for vehicle access. It's close to midnight. Like an idiot, I get out and walk around the car. I get back in, and my girlfriend and I both hear a woman's voice murmur something. Without speaking, we both look in the back seat where the sound came from. Nothing was there. "Did you say something?" I asked. "No. Did you say something?" she asked. We both check our phones. They're muted/on vibrate. I check the radio. It's off. The car is off. No one is around. It's completely dark. Needless to say, we left pretty quickly, and to this day, I can't explain where that voice came from. Case file number 1196, written by Pound Town. I witnessed my nephew's resurrection. I always try to convince myself that this was just my imagination going wild in a time of crisis. When my nephew was about 4 years old, we were at a picnic for a family reunion type thing at my uncle's house. In their backyard, they had this totally bitchin' treehouse that had a slide that went over a small creek. The treehouse was about 30 feet off the ground. It was the middle of summer, and the water had dried up in the creek, leaving only exposed rocks. I guess more like small boulders. They were about 3 feet in diameter, pretty solid. My nephew and the other kids were playing in the treehouse, all taking turns going down the slide, and no one was really paying attention. How it happened is still truly not known, but we do know that somehow my nephew fell off the slide at the highest point and fell headfirst into the dried up creek bed. The sound was the first thing everyone noticed. It sounded like a gunshot, this extremely loud cracking. Everyone at the picnic was silent at this point. I vividly remember running over to the creek to see what had happened, and every time I think about this day, I get the same image in my head. I remember seeing him laying on the flat rock, blood everywhere, and he's not moving. It's a really graphic image I get. Basically, his head is caved in. This thought is always followed by something I can only describe as static, if that makes sense. I don't remember what really happened, but my next memory is of my nephew laying on a bench, no blood, completely awake but crying really loudly. An ambulance came and took him to the hospital, and he only ended up with a concussion and some scratches and bruises. It still sticks with me though. I know what I saw, and I can't explain why I saw it. It feels like a memory, but it's not. I've never been a religious person, and I'm still not into organized religion, but I stopped being an atheist after that day. Case file number 1197, written by TL7LMT, The Power of Pure Love. This is my first memory. I was a toddler, and my dad and I drove into town. First, this was amazing because I come from a large family and my dad works 6 days a week. None of us ever got alone time with dad. So right off, this was special, a happy occasion for me. I remember sliding across the seat a bit when we went around curves. This was in the days long before mandatory car seats or even seatbelts. So we get to the store. My dad sets me down on the floor. I toddled over to some shelves, and I can remember looking down at my chubby knees and thinking, it's incredible that I can get around on these 2 legs and have my hands free to touch stuff. I was really young. I looked back at my dad, who was talking to some guy in a green apron, and they both smiled at me, so reassured. I kept exploring. Then I saw my very first black person. She was probably about 40, with a dusty old dress and headscarf, really run-down shoes, and a sullen, older child walking behind her. I was fascinated, so I toddled after her, got her attention, and lifted my arms up to be picked up. She looked around, so I did too. Dad was nodding his head at her, so she picked me up. She had the most beautiful colored skin, and it was so soft. I was stroking her face in awe of it when I noticed tears were trickling down her face. Somehow I knew she suffered because of her beautiful skin, and I laid my head over her chest and patted her shoulder with my hand. In my baby talk, I told her that it would be okay, that when she returned to her real home, heaven, she would be joyful and at peace, and all her suffering would be rewarded with angel songs and love. I told her that when she got home, no one would care about the color of her skin. I saw all of this in my mind, and I was explaining this to her, and she just held me and let me coo at her. Eventually, she let me down, and I toddled happily over to Dad, who picked me up and took us back home. Years later, I asked my mom how old I was when I learned to walk, and she proudly stated that all her kids were walking by the age of 1 year old. Dad remembered this day too. He was amazed that I remembered it. I did not begin any formal religious training until I was 5 years old, so I had no conception of religion. I certainly knew nothing about racial disparity. At that point, we didn't even have a TV. This was in Western New York about 1958. More cows than people where I lived. It's not a creepy story, but I can't explain how I knew what I knew that day. I was just too young to know any of it. Creepy file number 100, written by Viva22. Tuxedo-Clad stranger leaves girl bewildered. One time, when I was walking home from campus late at night, around 2 a.m., my university has dorms and I've been visiting a friend, and a kinda nice-looking car drove up on the sidewalk next to me. Now, considering the fact that I am not a very large girl, I thought I was about to have to fight off a kidnapper. So this guy steps out of the driver's side of the car in a full tuxedo and walks up to me and goes, "Miss, I just wanted to tell you that you look beautiful tonight." Then he promptly got back in his car and drove away. I never really understood what happened, but thanks for the compliment.
Case notes for the file 1184, the Silver Time Travelers. So time travelers, perhaps. From their perspective, the modern shop would have looked extremely bizarre. Perhaps they were a religious family, from a religious or Luddite type of community. Amish, or I think Mormons too. There are a lot of sects that live a simple life and still use older currency notes, not much technology, and so on. On a separate note, one thing that really irks me is the price inflation that we all experience now, which occurs from inflating the currency supply itself. If something cost $1 in 1957, in 2006 it would cost over $7 and over $10 today. I don't know any other way to call that other than theft. It's just robbing the purchasing power of the money that we have. Punishing savers and rewarding debtors. It's crazy. Moreover, it's insidious because so few even realize it happens or exactly why. If you're interested, I recommend a book called The Creature from Jekyll Island. It goes into depth about how the Federal Reserve was created, the reasons for it, and how it affects us today. Case notes file 1185. The Time-Warped Call. A delayed signal. Maybe the cell tower itself glitched and buffered that data but only sent it out after you connected to your own phone from a different one 2 weeks later. The one you called from at home intercepted that signal that was delayed by 2 weeks instead of going to the phone that was, right there under your bed. It's a very odd tech glitch if that's the case. If it's not technological, then it's a glitch in the Matrix's own systems. Somehow the radio waves transmitting that data were stuck in a temporal flux and only played back when you reconnected later on. One way or another, it's a signal glitch and just proves how similar our own technology and understanding of the world is symmetrical with simulation theory. It all makes sense if this is a computer simulation. There's so many parallels. Case notes file 1186. There were two versions of my daughter. My belief in these matters is that the soul connects to the body via some process we don't understand, but likewise it can disconnect or fragment off a bit. Sometimes it will, or close to, if you concentrate hard enough. A lot of meditation and will goes into that. Some monks dedicate their entire lives to understanding the process, and even then, often without success. But when we dream, it's like the hard lock on a train between the carts. The mechanism unlocks for us on its own, and they can separate, but not entirely. You're still connected by a cord, a chain, so you can pull yourself back. A permanent disconnection would be death in a certain sense, for the mortal body. I think usually this doesn't involve manifesting in the real world, because if you think about it, why would a soul have to manifest itself at all, and especially as a replica of ourselves? Not just the body, but usually the clothes that we wear too. It's all subconscious, I think. There's still that link to the soul. It's not a total disconnection. Because it could manifest in anything. It could become a rock if you wanted to, And now time for the quote of the day. In mathematics, you don't understand things. You just get used to them. Johann von Neumann. Yeah, it's similar to quantum mechanics where if you say you understand it, you don't really have a clue what's going on. It's like the triple experiment for light, where if you have two polarized lenses and you put them back to back, then no light will get through. It blocks vertical and horizontal light. But if you add a third to the middle, then it forces light to choose another time when it reaches that middle lens, and it'll choose to be either up or down, the wave orientation of light, and then it'll be able to pass the last one. You'll get 12.5% of light passing through the third lens, which makes no sense intuitively. But that's because everything is in flux in a sort of waveform. Not until something interacts with something else in reality is it forced to choose its own orientation and state. You see this with the double slit experiment too, which is just fascinating, where there's an interference pattern if light passes through two slits. Even if you only shine one photon at a time, it really does prove that light behaves as a wave and as a particle, but only as a particle when it's forced to. And this applies to everything, not just light. It's just easier to test with light. Even though I sort of understand it, it's not intuitive. It doesn't really make sense because our brains aren't designed to understand this stuff. We just are smart enough to approach a deeper understanding of reality than other animals can. But we're not evolved to understand it. So it's not intuitive. Nor does mathematics. Mathematics is just a tool. Case file number 1187. My pumpkin broke the universe. Halloween is my favorite holiday too, autumn being my favorite season overall, followed by winter and Christmas. You know that smell in the air as the leaves change colors? When they start to die off, they actually release certain compounds into the air, and it makes them smell so fresh and crisp, combined with the cooler air itself. It's sort of morbid to consider how good plant decay and death smells. The pumpkin in the story is from another universe, almost certainly. Over there you did have time to decorate, and the pumpkin hopped over to your place instead. This is certainly the more pleasant of the two-sided coin. On one side, you lose the pumpkin that you had spent time decorating, and the other, you gains. The other possibility is that your boyfriend was pranking you, but in those cases, it doesn't make sense to me because a prank, the payoff is when you reveal that it was a prank. So if you never reveal it, I mean, what's the point? I mean, that's not even a prank then, it's just gaslighting and kind of abusive. It's probably more likely that it's just from a different universe, which is kind of neat. Multiverse, pretty weird place. Case notes for file 1188. The Matrix translated my conversation. Now, I don't think the whole group heard Vietnamese when English was spoken. Your brain filled in the gaps in meaning and translated it to you, filtered back through time. That's what's interesting about our conscious perception and experience of the world. It's not in real time. It takes many milliseconds for the brain to process inputs from sound, light, and other senses, then constructs an image of reality based on those inputs. The real kicker is how many tricks the brain uses to fill in those gaps, and even can retroactively alter past perceptions. In other words, the input received was Vietnamese words, but your subconscious translated it to what it thought it meant, and then fed it back to you in English, in that comprehension. That's my guess anyhow. This kind of glitch has happened a few times, although even more wild is when someone actually speaks the language, doesn't just understand it. Then the ability is lost instantly after. I still attribute this to sort of a glitch in that there may be additional information that your subconscious is picking up on, beyond the immediate stimuli from just the words spoken, stuff like that. There could even be future information involved. Case notes for file 1189. The strange case of seeing myself. I think part of why you felt so creeped out in seeing yourself, really seeing your soul, I would guess, is part of your soul had to detach from your body. There's still a tether, but it's not normal. And this is extremely rare and unusual when conscious. It's not supposed to happen. Heck, it may even be an actual glitch within the simulation, some coding error that made you lose cohesion with the connection between this simulation, your body in it, and the real world. Whatever process is involved there may not be perfect. And if that wouldn't make you feel unsettled, I don't know what would. You're losing your connection to this simulation, like the plug in the back of your head, in the Matrix. Sort of like pulled out, maybe? Halfway? Can't be good. Case notes, file 1190. The Vanishing Popcorn Shirt. You eliminated the obvious mundane answers to this mystery. No one bought all the shirts, and they were replaced by the store employees. Both unlikely answers, but also possible. But they're crossed off. You already checked them off. If you think about it logically, what other answer could there be besides seeing and interacting with a parallel world? I can't think of anything else besides some weird gaslighting prank that's not even a prank, where they just never tell you it's a prank. I mean, that's possible, but it's so weird. Or outside of someone literally just stealing those specific shirts without being seen by any employees and then replacing him themselves with a different type of shirt. But that doesn't really make sense either, does it? So all I got is different universe. Now time for the quote of the day. Nowadays, men lead lives of noisy desperation. James Thurber. It's that constant distraction for your mind, right? Games and TV shows and music and all that. And I'm actually forcing myself now when I go on walks. I take 3 walks a day. I don't always have a podcast in, only on 2 walks. So for one of those walks, I just have my own mind and nothing in. No headphones, no earpods, just my own thoughts. And it's relaxing. It's sort of meditation, really. And if you're not comfortable with your own mind, maybe there's some fundamental fear or anxiety you need to address. And I recommend you try to. Because if we're always distracting our mind and never let it sit, I think there's something wrong there. And it's not just, you or me, it's pretty much everyone. Social media and our phones have definitely altered our own brain chemistry, and probably not in a good way. Case notes of file 1191, When the Moon Stares Back. Another moon anomaly. I do love these. I'm thinking laterally here, because the moon has too much weird funk going on around it, and yet I'm still convinced it's real and basically a hunk of rock that broke off from Earth a while ago. So are aliens involved here, in distorting our perception of the moon? Maybe it's thinking back on it after the fact of some abduction, and the subconscious is only able to infer what happened into your conscious mind with these strange distortions in reality. It can't quite pull on the exact memory because it was suppressed by the aliens. Like the moon buzzing around or rippling, or in this case staring right at you. Damn, is that a creepy thought? It would certainly make you wonder. And in these cases, I would say, if you want to know the truth with a greater deal of certainty, hypnotherapy is the only answer to that. It can help you uncover those memories, but maybe they're suppressed for a good reason. So I'm not saying do it, but if you want the truth, that's probably the only way to get it. Case notes, file 1192. The Mysterious Savior in Green Flannel. Interesting how these guardian angel events often involve a mysterious man saving them. Maybe angels have to possess a real human body to interact in the world, similar to the lore in Supernatural. Or maybe they're just not visible, but the subconscious mind creates some figure that is saving them. A man being a simple and understood choice. I wonder if your favorite color is green. Case notes, file 1193. When food transcends time and space. People with whom we are intimately involved with, in love, familial love too, or very strong friendships, I think a link forms between our souls. Think about the invisible connection of our soul to the host body, in the real world. We have no idea what that connection actually is or how it works, but why couldn't it connect with others, near us? It's a metaphysical Wi-Fi network, I like to call it. And I think the security feature involved, preventing just anyone from connecting to it, is time and deep thoughts and emotions. But then maybe this is why so often people can connect to negative souls. Because they do spend a lot of time near them, because there's a lot of emotion involved. Maybe that's why charismatic people are so good in forming cults. And you don't exactly feel it, but it's all subconsciously processed. And then you're bonded with that person and linked. And you didn't even realize. Case notes of file 1194, The Curse of the Old Trunk. I don't cover cursed objects much on this channel. It doesn't come up often. Being so rare doesn't mean it can't exist, though. I wonder if these curses are actually spells woven into an object, or maybe restless spirits that guard these specific objects. Less of a curse in that case, it'd be a direct involvement from those people who died and remain as spirits or ghosts. And in this case, didn't want their property to be disturbed. It may even cause a kind of physical pain or torment, because it's what binds them to this realm. Now time for the quote of the day. I phoned my dad to tell him that I had stopped smoking. He called me a quitter. Stephen Pearl. Ah yes, the one time that quitting is acceptable. If you're struggling to stop smoking, the struggle is part of the process. But I believe in you. You can do it. My real-life X-Files experience on a desolate highway. I think there's a reason so many UFO stories sound similar, because it's a similar type of alien that is abducting people. There probably are multiple species that observe us, at least. I doubt there's just one. So it's no accident. And whatever technology this brand of alien uses has an effect on our electronics. It distorts them. Plenty of our devices can interfere with other electronics, for instance, cell phones on a plane. That's sort of archaic now. Cell phones don't really have the juice to interfere with onboard systems that are typically shielded on a plane. But with enough power and unshielded like in a car, like say with a hyper-unfathomably advanced alien spaceship, get Doc Brown and his 1.21 gigawatts out. Gigawatts. A question here that's so interesting to me. Did your mind conjure up the cop car as a reason you pulled over to the side? Was it a constructed memory? Or was it really a cop car randomly pulling you over, and then you were abducted by aliens? Perhaps the lights went out for the cop car too if it was real, since the alien ship interfered with the electronics on both cars. You popped the hood, and bam, abducted. You didn't mention seeing a cop car near yours when you returned back from the field, so maybe the same thing happened to him, but he got back first and he was freaked out and just took off. Case notes for the bonus file. Ghostly whispers, stuns, unsuspecting couple. Sounds like a spirit trying to warn you of something. If I had to venture a guess, a lot of people stop nearby that area to refresh themselves before in the past, and accidents then ensue. Perhaps she was one of the accidental victims, maybe of a drunk driver or something. You couldn't make out what was whispered, so it's hard to say, but my guess would be some kind of warning to leave so you don't become a victim as well. And now time for the quote of the day. Better to write for yourself and have no public than to write for the public and have no self. Cyril Connolly. Yeah, you see that with the rise, the advent of social media, TikTok and all that. It's not just writing, it's about whatever you put out on the internet as a part of you and your brand, so-called. Well, you want it to represent who you truly are. Otherwise you become a fake, you become a caricature of yourself. And you might get fame. It's like the deal with the devil. You get earthly power, but you sell your soul as a result. And it's an allegory, really. You know, selling your soul to the devil isn't an actual deal you make on like a crossroads and you go to hell after. It's just that you lose yourself. You lose the binding to reality and what actually matters, to connect well with other people. Just knowing that other people are there is important. Even though I'm more of a loner, I still value other people and the connections that can be made. Like even between us, just talking on this channel, it's made me appreciate how important people are and just interacting with them. But yeah, to end this, just say, be true to yourself. If you have social media or not, just be honest. Don't be a fake. Okay, so it's file 1196. I witnessed my nephew's resurrection. Treehouses, yes. My dad built me a treehouse when I was 10 or 11-ish. I helped him a bit. It wasn't extravagant, but we did have a tire swing as well. So many good memories in that place, though not over a creek or anything dangerous, just over grass, so if I fell down, it was fine. The treehouse in this story does seem rather dangerous. Here's a random thought. What if extreme emotional distress at an event can cause a soul to jump to a neighboring universe? Basically quantum immortality, but not initiated from physical body death, instead from emotional death. Your mind in that universe couldn't handle it. No idea if that's the case, and if it is, it's much more rare. But I could see that happening, why not? Why is only physical death what matters? Maybe emotional trauma does matter too, and you go to a new universe, and in that one, this terrible tragedy didn't actually occur, and your nephew didn't die. He's still alive, just with some scrapes and bruises. Case notes of file 1197, The Power of Pure Love. So I agree, it's not a creepy story, it's a beautiful story. I feel like this kind of thing broadcasted worldwide can just move hearts, minds, and souls, don't you? You were young, but your soul was not, and was tethered to all the real information out there. Now, as far as religion, what heaven really represents, it's hard to say. To me, it's the knowledge that this woman was in pain for something out of her control, and just being there for her as a kid. And you know, everyone says that kids are so honest, and they typically are. They don't have the filter that adults have. So I think it meant a lot to her in that moment, just as her as an individual. What more can you ask from a kid, you know, or from anyone? I love this story. Case notes for the creepy file number 100. A tuxedo-clad stranger leaves girl bewildered. That's one of the more randomly wholesome and accidentally creepy events I've ever read. Going with my gut, it may have been a somewhat wealthy man with poor social skills that didn't realize how strange approaching a woman on the street at 2 a.m. was. Doesn't seem like anything else happened, so I'll go with that. But yeah, very odd. Definitely compliment random people, it's nice, people appreciate it, and spread the cheer, but just don't do it to women at 2 a.m. or really a guy either. I would be creeped out too if some person just gave me a compliment while I'm walking at 2 a.m. Okay. You don't want to freak people out and think they're gonna get robbed or something. And now time for the quote of the day. A perfect parent is a person with excellent child-rearing theories and no actual children. Dave Berry. I just like this quote because I think I was a really good kid growing up, thinking on my memories and what my mom said, but even then I was still kind of a rascal, you know, so full of energy. Even if you're a good kid that doesn't like just randomly break rules or hit people or speak out or anything like that, I mean, I would be picky with food, I guess. I can only imagine how much energy it takes to raise a kid in just those first 2 years where you get no sleep. I need my sleep, so that's going to be an interesting experience whenever I do have kids. Yeah, we'll see. Like the video, subscribe, hit the bell. Kinetic Symphony signing off.